All right, everybody knows that normally the AUA is just Walter and Átila, but this year we expanded it a little bit because there have been a lot of changes recently, and we figured you might want to ask some questions about those. Now, recently we set some high-level goals to strengthen the community, enhance the ecosystem, and stabilize the language. So these two guys are in charge of the stabilization. Mathias and Robert are in charge of the ecosystem, and I and Ali are in charge of the community stuff. So we didn't want everybody up on stage. So Mathias and I are representing the community and the ecosystem. Dennis and Razvan, of course, are our pull request and issue managers. And they're also our workhorses. When we need bugs fixed, we throw it at them. And so I asked which one wanted to join us on the panel today, and Dennis volunteered.
I want to point out how much Dennis and Razvan contribute. I mean, they started out as the greenest of greenhorns with D, and you know, they've really grown into some pretty fantastic contributors to D. So we all owe Dennis and Razvan a big thank you.
Yeah.
You've all had the opportunity to meet Saeed over the last few days. Why is he up here on the stage? He's going to take any general questions you guys have about Ivy. Now, when we went through the Ivy program, it was a challenge for us to get into the mindset, but Saeed led us there very effectively over time. And as we implement what we learned, he's been coaching me and Walter to help us be more effective with it. So if you have any questions about our experience with Ivy and how we're applying it, we're happy to answer that. But Saeed will be here to answer any questions you have about Ivy in general. Yeah? And I really want to thank Ucora for offering us the opportunity to have this program. It's been very helpful to us.
Our shift in focus of what we're working on with D, Ivy. It's thanks to Saeed's work with us.
In the scope of like the next year or 2 years, what do you view as like the highest priority focus for D, or the highest important area for D to move into? And what group of people do you think this relates to? Like, should D be more involved in machine learning or game development? What arena would capture the most interest and utility out of D and might attract corporate sponsors, et cetera?
We started this year talking about cleaning up the D language and removing obsolete features. Well, this turned out to be the completely wrong direction, because we got a very large pushback about breaking people's existing code. So we're going to learn from our mistake, and the focus for the near future is to compile legacy code. Legacy code is not going away. People really, no matter how easy it is to fix legacy code, it's always a barrier, and we're going to stop forcing people to upgrade their code. And we're going to add the concept of additions to D in a not quite yet determined way to do it, but we have a new priority, and that is to not break people's existing code. And once we get that to a reasonable state, then we're going to start looking at you know, enhancing the language and things like that. But right now, our focus is on fixing bugs and making legacy code work without error as much as we can.
And on the library side, I want to not have anything in experimental anymore. The only thing left is allocators, so that would be great if we could finalize photos before even thinking about version 2, because version 1 still, I think more people would even consider it if it just weren't experimental. There's a psychological thing about it, which I understand. It makes complete sense.
When do you think that ImportC would be available generally?
When will ImportC be available?
Generally, also in LDC.
It's available now.
Also in LDC?
Yeah, it's in the compiler. It works.
Then I'm too late.
The main difficulty with ImportC is not compiling C code. It's compiling all the weird C extensions that appear in the header files that apparently the compiler vendors cannot resist constantly adding weird things and not providing a C route through the header files. It always has to be through all these bizarro extensions. Like one of them was expanding the assert macro to be statements. And everybody knows that you can't put a statement inside of an expression. Well, it turns out that GCC has some weird extension where you can actually insert statements inside of an expression. And there's no reason to do that with assert, but whoever wrote that somehow decided that they must do it this way because, oh, look at that cool giga, I must use it. Well, I found a way to make it work, but that's a thing where it constantly gets stuck on is some weird extension. For example, Stephen was just showing to me how the default route through the header file was using all these strange SIMD intrinsic functions, which of course don't exist in DMD. So we're going to have to try to figure out what are we going to do with that. I figure that's probably going to be a constant problem. No matter how many of those we fix, the compiler vendors are going to keep adding more of garbage like that. So it'll be a constant problem. But other than that, ImportC is working. And even if you got to tweak something to get it to go through the headers, it's a hell of a lot less work than Stephen had to do trying to import these. Which library, Stephen, were you importing? Raylib, yeah. Yeah, some graphics library header file. So.
All right, we have a few questions from the internet here. I'll try and keep them brief. First one is to Dennis. Yeah. If you will be BDFL, it asks which 3 things you will fix or improve first, but let's just stick to one. What would you improve first?
I would really like DMD to be used in Visual Studio Code or just any editor. Like currently, because I'm so involved with the compiler development, sometimes add a little hack like, oh, I want to know, is this import used? I quickly hack up some global variables inside the compiler, and I use that to refactor DMD. But like the general user doesn't have the privilege of that. Like they shouldn't obviously do something like that. I want DMD to just, all the information it analyzes, don't throw it away. Also give the users an opportunity to query that and use that for linting, refactoring, because manual refactoring takes so much time for decode. So yeah, working on better tooling, and I have to come up with 2 more.
No, let's just keep it at 1. We've got other questions to be asked. Okay, second question from the internet for Walter. What is your plan for making the DI generator be able to produce DI files for both static libraries and shared libraries when annotating with export? And that's a question from Ricky.
Ricky and I have gone around on this a couple of times, and I have a pull request to make DMD behave a lot like C compilers do on Windows with DLL import and DLL export. However, that requires the writer of making a shared library and using them aware of how DLL import and DLL export works. And Ricky wants to do a mechanism where the user or the programmer would not have to understand how DLL import and DLL export work. And his idea is that it should just work. So currently we are not agreeing on the right approach on this. So the issue is unresolved.
We have one more question from the internet before we get back to some audience questions here, and this is a general question. Is there any potential, this is from Lauren DB, sorry, is there any potential for future versions of D to turn on safe by default?
Okay, that was the plan. Unfortunately, that would break every legacy piece of code out there. And we want to continue to support legacy code without special switches and or by default. And so then we're looking at maybe doing something with editions support to turn this kind of thing on. So that's probably the direction we'll wind up going with that.
Yeah, I can't see it as being able to do it any other way and not break people's code, which we really need to stop doing.
This is for Walter. You said that every C compiler vendor is doing their own thing. So does that make you hope that if DMD does its own thing and adds arrays to C, other compiler vendors might follow since they already do so much custom things?
I've never made an official change proposal to the C committee, but one of the members of the committee has informed me that he was going to write up a proposal, an official proposal based on my proposal for adding arrays to C. I don't know if he's progressed with that or what's happening with that, but as far as I know, he hasn't submitted an official proposal. However, the idea is really simple, and if anybody wants to do it and make it in an official proposal, that would be cool. It wouldn't be that much work. I actually proposed adding those arrays to ImportC, and I got rather strong pushback. Why are you spending your time improving C? And you should be spending your time improving D. So I kind of want to do it as a proof of concept thing so that, the C people would see that this is a easy change. It fits right in with the compiler. It's not going to break anything, and it will solve the buffer overflow problem in a simple and effective and admittedly D-ish way. The proposals, various people have implemented safe arrays in C, but always with a truly execrable syntax. And D syntax is just so trivial. I don't understand why they just don't switch to the D syntax. So anyhow, I'd love to see it in C. It would certainly make interfacing with C a lot easier.
I wanted to ask a question about this legacy code again, because I guess the reason why you were removing these old features, or whatever we call them, was to make the language more lean. Do you think that in the future the language will you be able to develop new features just as fast while supporting old legacy stuff? And what implications will it have on like 10 years if you continue to support old features?
That's a great question, because it's taken C like 30 years to deprecate some really, really bad features. And they're finally getting around to getting rid of them. I hope we don't have to wait that long to get rid of bad features. But we are going to have a way to say with the additions thing to say, give an error on all use of bad features. So, and it will be opt-in. It won't be on by default. But for the people who want to modernize their code, they're not going to have to deal with the problems with old features, because we're gonna help them with that. We just don't want somebody who's wants to use a library on Dub and the original maintainer has moved on to other pursuits or got hit by a bus and it doesn't compile anymore with the latest compiler and people get angry, and we just want to stop that from happening.
I think in 10 years' time, what might happen that is a trade-off, obviously, is increased complexity of the compiler, because you'll have to have code in there to handle more than one edition, obviously.
Yeah, we're just going to be stuck with that. I mean, the compiler is going to get more complicated. You all saw my presentation the other day. One of my efforts is constant refactoring of the front end to trying to make it stupid simple so that we can handle more complex scenarios with it.
Serg is asking Mathias, what is the main thing you think is stopping the ecosystem to start increasing exponentially?
It's a very good question. I think it needs to reach a certain critical size. At the moment, we're missing some basic tools, Infobos, and I used to think that they shouldn't be Infobos, but I changed my mind. Thanks to Andre. Deserialization library, XML parsing, better JSON parser, YAML parser directly Infobos so that people don't have to find it. Essentially make things, makes the basic there and let people build on it.
Anybody else have any opinions while you're up there? You've all been involved in D for a while. You must have an idea of your own.
About what's stopping wide-scale adoption? Marketing.
Yeah, I was about to say more blogs. Yeah.
More articles, more, watch the news groups when they talk about programming topics. And, if there's something appropriate to say about D, mention D. I mean, it definitely works and gets attention. And I do it all the time. And sometimes I get, oh, there's Walter again talking about D, but that's what you got to do. And, I try not to be obnoxious about it or anything. Just bring it up in casual conversation on the internet. I use my Twitter feed is dedicated to talking about programming, and I try to say interesting things about programming, but like with a D, the examples I give just happen to be in D. And it's got around 6,000 followers, which is not great, but it's not bad. And I encourage everyone who's interested in improving the scale of D to use Twitter or other social media to talk about what they're doing with D. It doesn't have to be bragging. It doesn't have to be, smarmy or a hard sell or anything like that. Just talk about your programming work. And, oh, by the way, it happens to be in D. And you don't make a big deal about it. You just talk about the cool things you're doing.
Yeah, okay. Well, here's my suggestion. Hear me out. The official D-Lang TikTok. Come on, we must have some meme lords in this community. Can we have a D-Lang TikTok, please?
I'm cringing just thinking about that.
How much more refactoring does DMD need to do to be able to be packagized?
I think you'll be pleased to hear, Nick, that I've been able to take a number of modules in D and cut way back on the number of imports they make. So there is some progress in that direction, although they haven't gone as far as putting them in packages, but at least trying to move the source code away from every package or every module is importing every other module. I really want to get away from that and do better encapsulation and containment.
After having completed the Ivy program, what's going to be the next steps? And will you guys be sharing your Ivy statements and that of the Language Foundation?
Yes, when I get back from vacation, I'm going to be posting our Ivy statements, and all of us have personal Ivy statements. I can go ahead and give you the Foundation's Ivy statement now. The D Language Foundation exists to enable the realization of ideas by shifting the way programmers think. What does that mean? It means that every goal we set, every task we set out to do, we measure it against that first part. Does it enable the realization of ideas? If it does, it's something we need to consider. If it doesn't, we're not even going to think about it. We have to look at existing features. Is it preventing people from realizing their ideas? What does that mean? If you're having problems with bugs and error messages, we need to make that a priority, right? Before, we thought, oh, you've got all these long error messages. We never prioritized reducing the number of error messages or deprecation messages. Failing to build old source code, that's not enabling you to realize your ideas, right? That's why Walter decided we need to support old source code. We need to undeprecate these deprecated features, okay? That's what that means for us, all right? It's just a tool by which we evaluate what are our priorities and how do we enable people to use D and our whole ecosystem to build their ideas, to make their ideas a reality.
Yeah, when we talked about our Ivy statements in these coaching sessions, I was surprised. I really didn't know why the other people were there working on D, and I was surprised at the diversity of motivations they had, and it was a real eye-opener for me. And knowing people's Ivy statements allows us to allocate our tasks and resources much more efficiently than what we were doing, because we can, match the person who's excited about a particular thing with a task that fulfills or fits in with their particular excitement about it. I mean, I find certain kinds of jobs, like I don't really want to do them, but sometimes there's somebody else who really wants to be doing that kind of thing, and I shouldn't be doing that. He should be doing that, and vice versa. I shouldn't be trying to push them into doing something that they really don't want to be doing.
And Walter has often said that when people come to him and say, I want to work on something, what should I work on? And he gives them a list, and then they go and work on something else.
Happens every time.
So learning what we're learning about Ivy, we're learning how to talk to people to discover what their Ivies are without ever saying, hey, what's your Ivy? Where are their interests, where are their motivations, where are our interests aligned? And that will help us onboard new contributors more easily, I hope. And I do want to say that Ivy statement, that Ivy vision statement that we have, it took us a long time to get there. About 3 or 4 sessions, I think, because none of us could get past the fact that the D Language Foundation exists to manage the D language. I mean, right? It says it right there on our website, right? That's why the D Language Foundation was created. But Saeed kept stressing, the D language is a tool. It's a tool. Our YouTube channel is a tool. The website is a tool. Our whole ecosystem, it's all tools, right? So it took us a while. Who was the most difficult, do you think, Saeed? Who did you have the most challenge with? Who were you most challenging to get over the hump? Who do you think that was?
Like who's Ivy?
No. To get to the point you were trying to get us. See, he didn't tell us this is what it is, this is what it is. He was pushing us in the direction, asking questions. What's this? What's this? And we're like, oh no. And he finally got us there. Who did you have the most? Who do you think took the longest to get there? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Answer carefully.
Or don't answer at all. Like,
no, it's
maybe.
just, yeah.
Well, I can't say hardest, but it took a long time because we. It's just what I said in my speech, right? It's just think of an iceberg, right? It's quite visible and tangible to see. Of course, it's about the language. What else is there, right? But when you really dig deep and you understand, okay, what is the language about? Why do we even have this language? Why is it so different from any other language? Like, what distinguishes D from any other language, right? And then you go deep and you understand that, well, there is this set of mindset and principle that's behind D. Like, why did Walter even create this language in the first place? That is the core value behind the D language, I believe. And for the whole organization, D Language Foundation, to realize that it's becoming something, it's moving towards something. And for all the stakeholders, especially the contributors, customers, for them to know where that direction is, where it's moving towards, and where everybody else is moving towards in their life, and how can this be aligned? That's deep work. So that's why it took long, really, like sessions. Even with the individuals writing their own Ivy statements, I believe at the end of the workshop we didn't have we had the first version or the second version. Right. It keeps evolving as people evolve, but for the foundation to, I believe, realize that D as a language is just a tool, right? It's just a tool to move towards something like a big vision, like a grand vision. And what is that? And it wasn't my place to even answer that question. It's your foundation, it's your organization. My job was to ask questions.
And you're very good at that.
The reason, people would ask me, well, I want to contribute to D, what can I work on? And I would give them a list of things that needed doing, and they would do something else. And you now see the fundamental failure of that approach is I neglected to ask, what kinds of things do you want to work on? There's all kinds of different topics. So I failed to ask, well, what floats your boat? And if they told me that, then I could find a task that fit their interest, but I failed it never even occurred to me to ask.
If I may add something, we do use the word Ivy, and fundamentally what it is every single person, like all of us, we're going from our point A to point B in life, right? There's a reason why you're all here. We are all here. There's something in it for us, whatever it is. And wherever we are going from this point A to our point B, whatever that is something that motivates us. That's why you are all here and why you spend so much time contributing to this language. So knowing what that is and what is it that you're moving towards is what gives the foundation, the idea of what every single person is motivated to do. And therefore, trying their best to align whatever that needs to be done for the organization to move toward that vision, right? Like who is doing what. It's not just about doing things, it's more about certain people doing certain tasks is going to help them move towards whoever they want to become in their life. In their point A to point B to point or C to point D, even for a short time.
We've actually got an online question for you, Saeed, from Ricky. Now that you have spent a bit of time with the wider community, have you observed any bureaucracy that we could remove to improve our ability to improve the ecosystem?
Hard question, because I don't think I've been that involved with like that level of detail to exactly know what that is, to be honest. I've been involved mainly with I would say more of a low resolution map, like the vision and everything. I would say that's maybe Walter can answer that question better. Am I right?
Well, in our meetings, we never really got involved in how we were doing things. You mainly had us talking about what are our goals and what direction we're going, not how we're going about it, or how our organization worked didn't even really come up much. So yeah. It was more goals and methods rather than our organization.
But I can just say this: once you have that vision, then what you do is there are lots of things to do, right? And then you set some big goals that are all aligned with that vision, and each goal breaks down into smaller goals, right? That's just standard. But what needs to be done is every single goal, no matter how big or small, as Michael said, is it aligned with that vision? Is it going to help the organization move towards that? If yes, that's the priority. If not, maybe not now, maybe later, maybe never. Yeah, if that helps.
I already streamlined things because I realized with my Ivy statement what I really didn't want to do instead of what I did want to do. And now I just delegate pull requests to Razvan and Dennis. And I know that if I need to look at something, they'll tag me and I'll just look at those instead.
And I can say I actually had 2 Ivy statements. The first Ivy statement I had, we had a session later saying, based on your Ivy statements, do you know what kind of task to give this guy, right? And everybody already knew what kind of task I would do. I'm the guy for the blog, not, fixing the bugs. They already knew that. But based on my first Ivy statement, no, that wasn't that. But I had to change it. But that first Ivy statement did help me realize I really, I don't want to be teaching English so much anymore, right? And that's given me more time to work for the D Foundation. So that's a benefit from my perspective.
I guess this isn't directly Ivy related, although it helps to have a it's related to a clarity of vision. Is the one thing that comes to mind with regard to editions? It's something that I'd quite like to see tried, but we've been somewhere between bad and hysterically awful at basically achieving our goals. So what are we going to do to actually make
first try to
happen,
spec,
and what?
Basically work on that and work out all the possible ways it could go wrong, because going right is really boring, right? If it works, it works. So it's what could go wrong, what we need to take care about, maybe there's things we can't do for whatever reason. So that and if you're concerned about that and you're volunteering to help publicly, I appreciate it.
I can. Hang on.
You can.
But I'm also, but
You don't
what I
want
mean
to.
is that we need to carefully that we need to make sure the feedback loops are there such that it actually happens, basically. So and also we may potentially need an IV, pun intended, of like crack cocaine or something to make it.
Feedback loop would be messaging me in Slack and getting a reply. So
Yeah, I would like to add, we've already been somewhat doing additions in the form of preview switches, and we have been successful at trying new features without breaking existing code using that. But we've been unsuccessful with making users adopt the switches and convert their code. And I think a big reason of that is that those preview switches, like they're hidden somewhere in the command line, and you have to configure your build system and coerce other libraries to also use the switch for compatibility. And the fundamental difference with additions is that you just annotate the module, like, oh, I want this module to have dip 1000 checks, and then you can incrementally add dip 1000 without, using that as an example, without having to fiddle with all these dip 1000 flags in all the configurations of projects. So we'll have to see how that works out.
All right, we have a question from the internet here for Átila. What happened with standard version 2? Is it gone or is it just stalled?
no, I think that, SED version 1 needs to happen first, and it hasn't because there's still things in experimental. And there's been a few concerns about the API of allocators and a few other things. So to be honest, that's what I want to be working on and moving that forward. And then I think we can think of SDV2. I don't think it makes any sense to do, to put the cart before the horse, as it were. So that's it. I think allocators need to be finalized first, and then we can think about that. I don't think it makes sense to move forward before.
So seeing as we're not going to be removing features in order to make sure that people's old code keeps working, and then we're going to have, I guess, additions that help solve this problem. What is a feature that you can think of that you'd kind of like to get rid of, but actually will cause an ongoing problem for complexity in the language or complexity in the compiler? Because the argument is always, oh, but if you can't remove the old stuff, the complexity builds up, blah, blah, blah. Now, to some degree in users' code, they can manage this by just not using the old features that interact in stupid ways, or we've got introspection abilities to prevent your new code interacting with old horrible features in some ways. But the compiler doesn't have that luxury. It has to keep doing everything, right? So yeah, what's an example of a feature that might actually cause us a problem here?
I want to remove the complex number support because it's a lot of complicated code, and I like to just get rid of it. Complex numbers can be properly supported with a library type. Why burden the internals of the compiler with it? And so I'd like to get rid of it. Is anybody here actually using the native complex number support? Yeah, it may actually be already dead. Dead as in there are no users of it. If that's the case, I would probably like to just, turn it off and get rid of it. But I don't really know if it's, most sincerely dead yet.
Classes. I'm only half joking. Kind of, sort of.
I think there are some features which are problematic because they're so ill-defined. Traits compiles comes to mind. And it's used a lot and often in benign ways. So we can't just remove it without offering a replacement. But you can create, if you want, such crazy contradictions with, oh, if this member doesn't exist, declare it, and now it exists. And then if you have two of those blocks, you get a compile time race condition, which traits compiles does the compiler see first, and then that member gets added. And that, it gives a lot of complexity in the way everything in D might reference every other thing. So yeah, that's something I would like to get rid of, but it's going to be hard to do.
I would also add that alias this, especially for classes, if you look at the implementation, because it was underspecified, basically almost every file that does semantic analysis has a special case, at least one special case for alias this. So it has extended like cancer all over the code base.
And for me, extend C++ with an identifier.
What?
Extend C++ with an identifier for the namespace.
Oh.
Same thing as last year.
With things like complex numbers and the C++ stuff is slightly different, but they're kind of in a category where they're things that we should get rid of because they're stupid or because they're unnecessary, but they're also, from a complexity perspective, they're actually quite cheap. If you think about it as a kind of as a tree or some kind of hierarchical structure of the complexity in the compiler, if you get rid of complex numbers, you can get rid of a bunch of stuff in the back end, but you're not going to be. You still have floating point calculations and so on in the back end. Whereas I think Dennis's answer is much closer to on the money as to what we actually need to do. And the answer, for example, couldn't be, oh, we're going to remove traits compiles because it's a fundamental idiom in the language, but we can add things to replace that, which are more specific and thus easier to compile, because the idiom of I'll just try it and see if it fails is actually extremely general and thus subscribes to effectively complex, like whole scale complexity in the compiler. So for example, I've actually implemented, I think Steve mentioned it on BDFL in passing once, effectively a compile time scope guard. So you have like static scope fail, and I've implemented that. And you can, I think Andre was wondering about catching compile, having static try before, for example. So this is the kind of thing where we have to be clever and invent our way out of these problems versus just trying to find cheap wins that are worthwhile but frankly don't actually matter that much in terms of how the language is actually used. And for the record, the complex numbers have been deprecated for a while. I think Ian did most of the, as far as I'm aware, I think did a lot of the work to get the library ones to the same, generating the same code, because there are some subtleties in how you actually want to do like complex division and so on. But they've been deprecated for a while, and we can, I think, very easily, they could be a very good example of something we can do with additions as a toy.
People have been asking occasionally if traits compiles could output the errors if it encountered one. But as a compiler developer, I really don't want changing compiler messages to be a breaking change. So if they just get the raw string, they could test against it, and then if I just fix a spelling error, it could break build guide, especially if you expand it to everything. So that's one thing to be wary of by making traits compiles more expressive or something like that.
Now that you've all gone through the Ivy workshops and all that, has it increased your enjoyment of working on D? Are you all happier people?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd say yes, not necessarily because of Ivy, but because I feel we're moving in a more productive direction with D. So I think Ivy has the potential of making us much more successful as a community and as a language, and that makes me feel good.
Well, also the workshops and what came from that, and we've been doing these planning sessions since then. Everything that's come from Ivy has improved our working relationship quite a bit. Before it was really stiff, not formal, but just standoffish. Now it's very casualish. We're all very casual with it now. Would you agree? Yeah.
Yes, I think it has improved significantly, and that's really nice. I regard the foundation members and you guys all as our dear friends.
Yeah, but the bigger thing, that has helped us resolve decisions and disagreements in our meetings and our planning sessions. Before, we could go an hour or 2 hours talking about things and arguing and disagreeing, but now we just get to the point and get it done. That's been a big benefit.
Yeah, now we have a yeah, a weapon. If we're arguing about something, we just go, does it fit the Ivy? And if it doesn't, then we don't have to argue about it anymore. We can just get rid of it.
I saw there is a CI pipeline to test D-Lang new features on a selected subset of DAB projects. So my question was, it was triggered by this complex numbers informal poll in the audience. Is there a plan, for example, to just build all DAB packages?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And you can test new
basically
features.
The issue there is figuring out which ones build and you test, because otherwise, there's dead projects. The challenge is getting a list from code.dlang.org of things that make sense to even try. But yes.
If the language is changing, it would be nice to have some way of doing a linter. So you can say inspect. Okay, maybe you have to have use this instead of this, like the deprecate thing. It would be nice to have something like this.
Yeah, I think the issue with that people brought up is string mixins and things. So it might depend on the context it's being used, and you might not be able to find it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do the ones we can, I guess.
This one is from Seg to Walter. At what point in time, what would it take to make you think that, now we are ready to discard dip freeze?
Discard dip freeze?
Freeze as in, frozen freeze.
Oh, I can answer that one. We'll be getting the dip queue going later this year, before the end of the year. That's coming soon.
We're not going to be able to fix all the bugs. Okay, there's always going to be something wrong and something new coming up, but we kind of, I think we'll know when we get over the hump with this, and we can start entertaining enhancements to the language again. But right now, we want to stabilize and get the worst of the problems dealt with.
Okay, next online question is from B2Her, and it's directed at Saeed. And the question is, do we all have to be in the Ivy thing so that Ivy works?
No. You can, yeah, absolutely. You can use, Ivy is your ideal vision of yourself, right? So, and as people, there is not only one layer to us. We have multiple layers. We're multiple people at the same time. So we have professional ideals in our mind. We have personal, what kind of a person I want to be as a human being. What kind of a relationship do I want to have? What kind of a friend do I want to be? And for each and every one of these aspects, you can write an Ivy statement. We actually have names for them. We have professional Ivy statement, which means professionally who you want to become. A personal Ivy statement as a person who you want to become, and so on and so forth. You can have a family Ivy statement. What kind of a family do you want to build? So you can write all those, and you don't have to share it with anybody if you don't want to. But the first thing that it does, it helps you have a direction in life and know exactly what kind of decisions you need to make and what kind of decisions you shouldn't make, and what's going to help you move towards whatever that you want to build. Because without that direction, all there is are just goals, and then you hit the goal, and then now you have accomplished that, and then now you have to go to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and it never ends. And if goals are not accomplishing something that helps you move towards something like a direction, then you're just accomplishing goal, and that's never fulfilling. Did I answer the question?
Well, I would just like to add that I think they were talking about if you're in the D community, and as far as how Ivy applies to us, you don't have to care about it, right? You can just go on doing what you're doing and not even worry about it.
That's what I asked at first. So regarding the D-Language Foundation, if the question is, do I need to have an Ivy statement to be able to contribute to the D-Language Foundation? Of course not. But if you do want for everybody to know what motivates you, so that they can actually put you in a situation, create an environment, an opportunity for you to actually be motivated and do what you really love to do, well, I think that's a good idea to do that. Otherwise, you don't have to.
With respect to at least perceived balkanization of the language with all the attributes that we have, you see this particularly when you're writing libraries and people saying they have to adopt the no GC hair shirt kind of a approach to libraries. And I was wondering if there is some kind of consensus as to is that even a problem, and if so, then kind of how should we move forward? Now, I'll note one thing, that it seems like the ability to make the runtime easier to port is a pretty big deal. Once you got the runtime easy to port, then it's like, well, why wouldn't you have it? That kind of a thing. But I was just wondering, just generally, what's the feeling about? Is there a balkanization type of issue, and if so, how do you see it? How do you see it being resolved in the future? Because huge benefits in terms of composability and reusability and so on, I think.
That's sure a great question, and something like better C's. Some people say it splits the language into two, and I don't really see it that way. It just seems like better C is a subset of D. And you can make a library work with both better C and with regular C, with regular D, just by writing to that subset. That just seems straightforward to me. I don't see a point really in having two versions of the library, one with better C and one with not. It's just, if you want it to be usable for both, you just do it in a better C subset, and it's going to work with regular D too.
Yeah, you can absolutely handle the permutations manually. People do that. That's what they do currently. But what I'm saying is that leads to composability issues. Essentially, you have to be aware of this, and like essentially, who's my client? How are they going to nest it? I don't know. I'm not a big time library writer at present. I'm just kind of echoing some of the stuff I hear from Ricky, and it's like, wow, that sounds pretty bad. But I understand your position. I think that other people find it a little painful still.
Well, part of your question was that is it a problem? And I think, too many attributes, absolutely, because you have to write them, and it's a pain to write, it's a pain to read. I think in terms of how do we deal with it, probably with more inference, and instead of having a human have to do things, just let the compiler do it.
Yeah, Till, you had an idea yesterday that you talked about if the body isn't present, then it has to be explicit or something. I mean, that was an example of the kind of things that I was hoping were kind of in the mix and being thought of. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we've been talking about that.
I think a way for better C to reduce balkanization with better C is to remove the underlying reason why people use better C, because it's not always because they have to because they're on an embedded system or something. It's also sometimes because the regular executables of D are too big, or the runtime doesn't work with shared libraries, or it's not ported for WebAssembly. And if you can make that happen, then people don't have to use better C in the first place, and that would reduce balkanization a lot.
I heard that you guys talk about reducing the breakage and all of that, and I wanted to talk about that a bit more, because on my side, one thing I've been working on quite a bit is writing tools for D that people can use, like code formatters and stuff like that. And what has been a recurring problem is not the feature that have been deprecated and removed from D, but rather the feature that have been added over the years. And sometimes they're breaking change in ways that are more or less subtle. If we go back to the whole attribute stuff, for instance, if someone starts sprinkling no GC over their library, then suddenly you cannot interact with it if there are any kinds of callbacks or whatever. This kind of addition actually in my day-to-day practice causes way more breakage than any kind of removal. So I wanted to know if that's on your radar, if there are plans to handle that kind of stuff, because that's a real problem. Or at least if there are plans to build them together, because one thing that's happening is in that version we make throw an expression, it's not a statement anymore. And in that one we had no return. And in that one we had this special syntax for contracts, right? And in that one, and all those changes are positive, right? They are better than the thing before. But that means that every 3 months, every single tool breaks, and we have very poor tooling in the D community. And I think it's one of the main reasons, right? Because if every tool breaks every couple of months, then we don't accumulate them, right?
I guess to sum up, if we add a new keyword, we break code. Or break the tools. Okay.
update the tools.
I don't see that we have much choice about that.
DMD as a library?
I don't see a way around that. If you add new features to the language, you're going to break tools. What we're trying to do is not break existing code. But if you add a new construct to the language, like, C11 added the underscore generic syntax, I mean, you can't help but break.
Yeah, so C, C++ are a good example of, I think, a better way to do that, because they have their big upgrade every few years, and then bundle all the change, all the new stuff that they add in that single release. And now, if you're moving to C11, you're the tool writer, well, you're going to upgrade your tool for C11, and then you have a few years in front of you to do whatever else. And, they're going to be C, I don't know, 23 maybe. and you're going to make a big upgrade then, but, in the meantime, everything kept working, and the ecosystem can accumulate tooling.
That's editions. That's what we want to do with editions. To essentially bundle changes at a certain point and allow you to choose which one you use.
I've also done some work so that the Lexer can be built as a standalone module now, and so can the parser. So if you're building a source code that manipulates source code in D, if you use those, you should be inured against syntactical additions to the language. Your code will still work, or your tool will still work. I hope that will be a result of this. If you build your own Lexer and build your own parser, well, there's little I can do to help with that. I think it'd be nice if we could all use a common Lexer and a common parser, and that way we're not breaking the tools.
I guess it's a question for all of you. Where do you want to see the project evolve to in 5 years? I know it's a difficult one, but what comes to mind?
Well, we're going to start talking about that tomorrow at our planning session here.
Okay,
but I think Robert has something to say.
Yeah, let's park that then.
Yeah, I think it should be difficult to get tickets to DConf. Like, this room has to be packed to the brink.
That's right, world domination.
In 5 years, I want to see DMD work like the neat compiler does. That's what I want.
Yeah, honestly, one of the reasons why I always highlight new speakers is because I think we should have new speakers all the time, not just, regulars all the time. So the more new speakers, the better, because that itself is an indication of the health of the community, right? So, yeah.
One thing I'd like to see for our commercial users of D is that they're making money because they're using D. I mean, I want D to be a money-making machine for all you commercial users out there. I want it to be your secret weapon, your way to be, for your organization to be successful.
Grow the user base and make D just the best language.
There it is.
I think mass agreement of being the best language is what he means.
And I want to see YouTube full of D videos. Yeah. I want to see hundreds and hundreds of D videos, thousands. Yeah.
And similar to Robert for me, I want to see the same faces in 5 years and many more.
Cool. Final question for the panel. You looking forward to beer tonight?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Especially since I don't have a talk tomorrow morning.
Right. You're one of those guys. Okay, fair enough. All right, so that wraps up the Q&A panel. Thank you, everybody.